Welcome to Suri Cheating Story, where we share true stories of betrayal in love. Our channel brings heartfelt, real-life experiences from those who have endured the pain of infidelity. Whether you're facing challenges in your own relationship or seeking to better understand the complexities of love and trust, Suri Cheating Story is the place for you. Subscribe now to explore the emotional depths in the path to healing with us. Grace couldn't move, her feet glued to the hardwood, as Alexander scooped Lucy up with an ease that didn't match his polished suit. The baby let out a high-pitched squeal, her tiny hands smacking against his chest, and his grin broke wide, unscripted, unguarded, the kind of smile that belonged to a guy tossing a football in the backyard, not running a financial empire. It threw her. Yesterday, he'd been a shadow in the rain, all sharp lines and quiet commands. A man who didn't blink at handing over his house like it was a spare umbrella. Now he was sprawled on the rug, letting Lucy crawl over him like he was her personal playground, his deep laugh rolling through the room like a warm breeze. Grace's fingers tightened around the broom handle, her heart hammering against her ribs. This wasn't just a roof anymore. It was a shift, a crack in the walls she'd built, and she didn't know how to brace for it. "You're good with her," she said, her voice slipping out soft and tentative, like she was testing the air between them. Alexander glanced up mid-tickle, Lucy squirming in his grip, and that grin softened into something quieter, more real. "She makes it easy. Got a spark, this one. Lights up the whole place." He poked Lucy's belly, drawing out another burst of giggles that bounced off the high ceilings, and Grace felt her defenses tremble. She wasn't used to this. Someone seeing her daughter the way she did, not as a burden or a mouth to feed, but as a little fire worth stoking. "She's never had this," she admitted, the words spilling out raw and unpolished before she could catch them. "Someone to play with her like that. It's always just been us, you know." His eyes flicked to hers, steady and piercing. And for a heartbeat, she thought he'd dig deeper. Ask about the us, the jagged edges of her past she'd let slip. But he didn't. He just nodded, a quick dip of his chin, and turned back to Lucy, letting her tug at his tie like it wasn't worth more than every dime Grace had scrounged in the last month. The silence stretched, not awkward, but thick with something unsaid, and Grace let herself sink into it. She eased the broom against the wall, lowering herself onto the couch, her body still wired from years of running on empty. His offer from minutes ago, "Stay till you figure things out," looped in her head, a lifeline dangling just out of reach. It sounded too good, too simple, and that's what scared her. What was his angle? Guys like him didn't open their homes to people like her without wanting something back. She watched him searching for the catch. There he was, cross-legged on his own floor, letting Lucy climb him like a mountain, his tie now a crumpled mess around her chubby fists. He didn't flinch, didn't check his watch, didn't act like this was anything less than where he wanted to be. "You don't have to do this," she said finally, her voice cutting through the quiet, needing to hear it out loud. "The key, the house, why? Why us?" He sat up. Lucy settled in his lap and rubbed the back of his neck, his brow furrowing like he was wrestling with the question himself. "I don't know," he said, and the honesty in it caught her off guard. "Saw you out there in the rain, holding her like that, and it hit me. Couldn't just drive off. Maybe it's 'cause I've been there. Hungry, scared, nowhere to go. Didn't have a kid to fight for, though." "You do." His voice dipped low, rough with something old and heavy, and Grace's chest tightened. She knew that sound. Survival's echo, the kind that sticks even after you've climbed out of the hole. She'd heard it in her own voice too many times, whispering to Lucy in the dark, promising they'd make it. "I don't want anything from you," he added, locking eyes with her, firm but gentle. "Just stay. Long as you need." The words hung there, plain and unguarded, and Grace wanted to believe them. She wanted it so bad it hurt, deep, aching, like a bruise she'd carried too long. But trust was a ghost in her world, burned away by too many hands that gave only to take more. Christopher's face flashed, smooth-talking, warm, then ice-cold, when he'd emptied her accounts and walked out, leaving her with nothing but a baby on the way. She looked at Lucy, now gnawing on the bear's ear, her little world untouched by the scars Grace carried. That's what it came down to. Her daughter, Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford if it meant Lucy sleeping on concrete again. Okay, she said at last, the words small but solid, like a stone dropped into still water. We'll stay, for now. Alexander's face lit up, not smug, not victorious, just relieved, like he'd been holding his breath waiting for it. That flicker of vulnerability cracked something open in her, a sliver of faith she hadn't felt since before the world turned upside down. She could still feel the edges of doubt, sharp and familiar, but for once, she didn't let them cut. He stood lifting Lucy with him, and she reached out for Grace, babbling a string of nonsense that sounded like music. Grace took her, the familiar weight of her daughter settling her nerves, and Alexander stepped back, brushing off his slacks. I've got some calls to make, he said, nodding toward the study. Make yourselves at home. I mean it. He flashed a quick smile, small, almost shy, and headed off, leaving Grace alone with Lucy and a house that felt less like a fortress and more like a fragile possibility. She hugged her daughter close, burying her face in Lucy's soft hair, and whispered, Maybe this is it, kiddo. Maybe we're okay. It was a long shot, a whisper of hope against a lifetime of letdowns. But as Lucy nestled into her, Grace let herself imagine, just for a moment, that they'd finally found solid ground. Grace sat on the couch, Lucy dozing in her arms, the quiet of the mansion wrapping around them like a blanket. Alexander's footsteps faded down the hall toward his study, and the click of the door shutting felt final, like a line drawn between his world and hers. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, her eyes drifting over the room, the polished shelves, the art on the walls, the way the afternoon sun slanted through the glass, painting everything gold. It was beautiful. Sure, but it still didn't feel like hers. She was a guest here, a temporary blip in this man's life, and the thought gnawed at her. How long could for now last before the rug got yanked out from under them again? Lucy shifted, murmuring in her sleep, and Grace brushed a hand over her daughter's hair, anchoring herself in the one thing that made sense. She wanted to trust this. Alexander, the house, the fragile peace it offered. But trust was a tightrope she'd fallen from too many times. She'd trusted her parents to always be there until a drunk driver stole them away. She'd trusted Christopher to love her, to build a life with her, until he'd stripped her bare and vanished. Each betrayal had carved a piece out of her, leaving her wary, guarded, a survivor who knew better than to lean too hard on anyone. Yet Alexander wasn't like them. He didn't promise the moon or flash charm like a weapon. He just gave a key, a chance. No strings, he'd said, but Grace couldn't shake the feeling that strings always showed up eventually. She hugged Lucy closer, the baby's warmth a shield against the doubt swirling in her head. The day stretched on, slow and golden, and Grace kept busy, tidying the kitchen, folding Lucy's blanket, anything to feel useful instead of helpless. Lucy woke up cranky, so Grace carried her outside to the garden, letting the fresh air calm them both. The grass was still damp from the storm, the flowers nodding under leftover raindrops, and Lucy giggled as Grace set her down to toddle between the rose bushes. It was a small thing, watching her daughter chase a butterfly, but it hit Grace like a freight train. Lucy deserved this, not just for a day, but always. She sank onto a stone bench, her hands twisting in her lap, and let herself dream for a reckless second. A real home, a job, a life where she didn't have to beg or hide. Then the front gate buzzed, sharp and sudden, snapping her back to reality. Grace scooped Lucy up and hurried inside, her pulse kicking up. She wasn't expecting anyone. Alexander hadn't mentioned visitors, and the sound felt like an intrusion, a crack in this borrowed calm. She peeked through the window, and her stomach dropped. A woman stepped out of a sleek silver car, her heels clicking on the pavement like gunfire. She was tall, sharp-edged, dressed in a tailored coat that screamed money, her blonde hair pulled back tight. Everything about her said power, and Grace knew instinctively this wasn't a friendly drop-by. The woman, Victoria, she'd later learn, strode to the door with purpose, not bothering to ring the bell before pushing it open. Grace froze, Lucy squirming in her arms, as the stranger's voice cut through the house like a blade. "Alexander, you here?" He emerged from the study, his face tightening as he spotted her. "Victoria," he said, clipped and cool, like he was bracing for a fight. "What are you doing here?" She smirked, tossing her purse onto the console table like she owned the place. "Missed you." "Darling, thought I'd surprise you." Her eyes swept the room, landing on Grace and Lucy in the corner, and the air turned electric with tension. Grace shrank back, feeling like a trespasser caught red-handed, but Victoria's gaze was a laser, cold, assessing, dripping with disdain. "And who's this?" she asked, her tone syrupy sweet but laced with venom, her head tilting like she was sizing up prey. Alexander stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Grace and her daughter, Lucy, they're staying here for a bit." Victoria's laugh was sharp, a brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Staying? How charitable of you." She flicked her gaze to Grace, taking in her worn jeans the way she clutched Lucy like a shield, and smirked. "Didn't know you were running a halfway house now, Alex." Grace's face burned, humiliation curling in her gut, but she straightened, refusing to let this woman see her break. "We're just passing through," she said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. "Thanks to him." Victoria's smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed, and Grace felt the weight of unspoken judgment, like she was dirt under those designer heels. Alexander's voice cut in, firm and low. "That's enough, Vic. They're my guess." But Victoria wasn't done. She sauntered closer, her heels clicking, and leaned toward Alexander, lowering her voice just enough for Grace to hear. "You sure about this? Letting some stranger and a kid into your life? She could be anyone." The words landed like a slap, planting a seed of doubt Grace could see flicker in Alexander's eyes. He didn't respond right away, and that hesitation stung worse than Victoria's sneer. Grace's heart sank. She'd known it. Kindness always came with a catch, and now here it was, dressed in Prada and jealousy. She tightened her grip on Lucy, her mind racing. Was this the end of their haven? Had she been a fool to hope? Victoria turned, satisfied with the chaos she'd stirred, and headed back toward Alexander, her hips swaying like she'd already won. "Think about it. Alex," she tossed over her shoulder, "you've got too much to lose." He watched her go, his face a mask, and Grace stood there, feeling the ground shift beneath her. She didn't belong in this fight, didn't want to be a pawn in whatever game Victoria was playing. But Lucy whimpered, sensing the tension, and Grace made a choice. She wouldn't wait to be kicked out. She'd leave on her own terms if it came to that. Alexander glanced at her, his expression unreadable, and the silence between them stretched tight, ready to snap. Whatever came next, Grace knew one thing. She'd protect Lucy, no matter who tried to tear this fragile piece apart. The room felt like it was shrinking, the air thick with Victoria's perfume and the echo of her sharp words. Grace stood there, Lucy fidgeting in her arms, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Alexander's silence was a weight, pressing down on her, and that flicker of doubt in his eyes. It cut deeper than she'd expected. She'd seen that look before, the slow unraveling of trust, the moment someone decided she wasn't worth the risk. Victoria's heels clicked back toward the study, her smirk a victory lap, and Grace's stomach twisted. She wasn't going to stand here and let this woman, or anyone, turn her into a problem to be solved. She'd survived worse than a rich girl's jealousy. She'd survived this too. Alexander finally spoke, his voice low, edged with something she couldn't place. "Grace, hold on a sec." He stepped toward her, but she shook her head, backing up instinctively. Lucy's bear clutched tight against her chest. "No," she said sharper than she meant. "I get it. She's right. I'm nobody to you. Just some stray you picked up. We'll go." Her words trembled, but she forced them out, pride flaring up to mask the hurt. She didn't wait for his response, turning toward the stairs to grab their things. Her soaked coat, Lucy's blanket, the scraps of a life she could carry. She'd been dumb to think this could last, to let herself soften in a place she didn't belong. "Grace, stop." His voice caught her mid-step, firm but laced with urgency. She paused, glancing back, and saw him standing there, hands out like he was trying to hold something together. Victoria lingered by the study door, arms crossed, her smugness faltering as Alexander ignored her. "You're not a stray," he said, stepping closer, his eyes locked on hers. "You're not nobody. I meant what I said. You can stay. She doesn't get a vote." His tone was steel, but there was a crack in it, a plea she hadn't expected. Grace hesitated, her resolve wavering. She wanted to believe him, but Victoria's poison still lingered, whispering doubts she couldn't shake. "Then why'd you hesitate?" she asked, her voice breaking. Lucy squirming against her shoulder. "When she said it, she could be anyone. You didn't say anything. I saw it, Alexander. You doubted me." The accusation hung there, raw and exposed, and his face tightened, guilt flashing across it. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling hard. "I did," he admitted, and the honesty hit her like a punch. "For a second, yeah. Not because of you, because of her. She's good at twisting things, always has been. But I know what I saw in you out there, Grace. That's what matters." She stared at him, torn between running and staying, her mind a battlefield of fear and fragile hope. Lucy whimpered, sensing the storm in her mom's grip, and Grace loosened her hold, rocking her gently. Alexander took another step, his voice dropping softer. "I don't know your whole story. Don't need to. But I know you're not here to take anything from me. You're fighting for her." He nodded at Lucy, his eyes softening. "I get that. I've been fighting for something too. Maybe not the same way, but I know what it looks like. You're not going anywhere unless you want to." Grace's throat burned, tears prickling behind her eyes, but she blinked them back. She didn't cry, not in front of people, not anymore. Victoria's laugh cut through the moment, sharp and bitter. "Oh, come on, Alex. You're buying this? The damsel act. She's got a kid. Perfect sob story to hook a guy like you." Grace flinched, but Alexander turned on Victoria, his calm snapping like a taut wire. "Get out," he said, his voice ice cold, each word a hammer. "Now!" Victoria's smirk vanished, her face paling as she realized she'd overplayed her hand. "You're kidding," she sputtered, but he didn't budge. "Out," he repeated, pointing to the door. She grabbed her purse, her heels stomping a furious rhythm as she stormed past Grace, throwing one last venomous glare. "You'll regret this," she hissed, then slammed the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening, the mansion settling back into its hush, and Grace felt the weight lift. Just a little. Alexander turned to her, his shoulders slumping like he'd just shed a burden he'd carried too long. "I'm sorry," he said, quiet but firm. "She's gone, won't be back. You're safe here." Grace nodded, her voice stuck somewhere she couldn't reach. Safe. The word felt foreign, too big to hold, but his eyes held hers, steady and sure, and she let it sink in. Lucy wriggled free, toddling over to Alexander, and he crouched down, letting her grab his hand. Grace watched, her chest loosening as Lucy babbled at him, oblivious to the chaos that had just blown through. "She likes you," she said, a faint smile breaking through her guard. "Guess that's a good sign." He chuckled, lifting Lucy into his arms. "She's got taste." The tension eased, the room feeling lighter, and Grace let herself sit again, exhaustion seeping into her bones. She didn't know what came next, how long they'd stay, what this meant. But for now, Victoria was gone, and Alexander was still here, choosing them over whatever she'd offered. He set Lucy down, letting her toddle back to the bear, and looked at Grace, his expression softer than she'd seen it. "I meant it. Stay as long as you need. No one's pushing you out." She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Thanks," she whispered, and it felt too small for what he'd just done, standing up for her, for Lucy, against a woman who clearly mattered to him once. She didn't understand it, didn't know why he'd picked them over Victoria's glitz and venom, but it stirred something in her, a flicker of trust, faint but growing. Maybe this wasn't a fluke. Maybe, just maybe, they'd landed somewhere real. Lucy giggled, waving the bear, and Grace let herself breathe, letting the moment hold her steady, for now. The mansion settled into a quiet hum as the afternoon faded, the last echoes of Victoria's heels long gone. Grace sat on the couch, Lucy sprawled across her lap, the baby's soft snores blending with the distant chirp of crickets outside. Alexander leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching them with a stillness that felt new, like he was seeing something he'd missed before. The air wasn't heavy anymore, not with doubt or tension, but with a tentative peace Grace could almost touch. She didn't know how to thank him, not just for kicking Victoria out, but for choosing them, for standing in the gap when she'd braced herself to run. Words felt too small, so she just held Lucy a little tighter, letting the moment breathe. "You okay?" he asked, breaking the silence, his voice low and careful, like he didn't want to spook her. Grace nodded, meeting his gaze. Yeah, better than okay. She hesitated, then added, You didn't have to do that. Send her packing. She's someone to you, right? Alexander's jaw tightened, but he shrugged, pushing off the frame to sit across from her in an armchair. Was, he said, the word clipped. Victoria's been in my orbit a long time. Business, some history, but she's not who I thought. Today proved it. He ran a hand over his face, exhaling. She wanted control. You just want a shot. Big difference. Grace studied him, the lines of his face softening in the dim light, and saw something raw there. Regret, maybe, or relief. She got it. People like Victoria weren't strangers to her either. Users who dressed up selfishness and charm. She'd fallen for it once with Christopher, and it had cost her everything. But Alexander wasn't him. He wasn't promising her the world. He was just holding the door open. I don't know why you're doing this, she said, her voice steady now. But it's more than I've had in a long time. Me and Lucy, we'll make it worth it. I'll figure something out. Pull my weight. He shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. You don't owe me anything, Grace. Just take care of her. That's enough. Lucy stirred, blinking awake, and toddled over to him, dragging the bear behind her. Alexander scooped her up, settling her on his knee, and she giggled, patting his cheek. Grace's chest warmed, a quiet ache spreading through her. This, Lucy happy, safe, reaching for someone who didn't flinch, was what she'd fought for through every cold night and empty day. She's got you wrapped around her finger already, she said, teasing just a little, testing the lightness between them. He laughed, bouncing Lucy gently. Yeah, well, she's a tough boss. I'm just following orders. Days turned into weeks, and the mansion stopped feeling like a borrowed space. Grace found a rhythm, cooking breakfast in that gleaming kitchen, reading Lucy stories on the couch, even planting a few herbs in the garden while Lucy napped nearby. Alexander was around more than she'd expected, cutting back on late nights at the office, his presence steady but never overbearing. He'd bring home takeout after long days, sit with them in the evenings, trading small talk that grew less small, bits of his past slipping out, like how he'd hustled out of nothing, how success hadn't filled the quiet the way he'd hoped. Grace shared too, haltingly at first, her med school dreams, her parents, the fall that landed her on the streets. It wasn't a flood, just a trickle, but it built something solid between them. One morning he came downstairs with an offer, a job at Grayson Financial. Nothing fancy, just data entry to start. You're smart, he said over coffee, Lucy smearing oatmeal on the table between them. You could do more. Climb up. I'll teach you what I know. Grace stared at him, the mug warm in her hands, her mind racing. A job, real, steady, hers. It was a lifeline, a chance to stand on her own again. You sure? She asked, doubt creeping in. I'm rusty. It's been years. He grinned, wiping oatmeal off Lucy's chin. I'm sure. You've got grit. Rest is just details. She took it, and with it came a spark she hadn't felt since scrubs were her future. A purpose beyond survival. Time did its work, stitching them closer. Lucy started calling him Unca Alex. Her toddler lisped, turning it into a title he wore like a badge. Grace watched him grow into it, fixing scraped knees, building pillow forts, his laughter filling the house like it belonged there. One sunny afternoon, they were in the garden, Lucy chasing bubbles he blew, when she ran up and hugged his legs, shouting, "Oh, Daddy!" Grace froze, her breath catching, but Alexander just knelt down, scooping her up with a grin that lit his whole face. Hey, kiddo, he said, voice thick, and glanced at Grace, checking. She nodded, tears blurring her vision, because it fit, better than she'd dared hope. Victoria faded into a bitter footnote, her threats empty, her shadow gone. Grace heard through the grapevine she'd tried to spin some drama, but Alexander shut it down, his focus locked on the life unfolding here. He and Grace never rushed it. Love crept in slow, built on trust, on late-night talks and shared silences. When he kissed her one evening, Lucy asleep upstairs, it wasn't fireworks. It was home, steady and sure. They didn't need a label. They were a family, pieced together from broken bits, stronger for it. Years later, the mansion wasn't just his anymore. Lucy's drawings covered the fridge. Grace's desk sat in the office where she now ran numbers like a pro, and Alexander traded boardroom armor for a softer edge. One night they sat on the porch, Lucy curled between them, the stars winking overhead. "You saved us," Grace murmured, her hand finding his. He squeezed it, shaking his head. "Nah, you saved me. Gave me something real." She smiled, leaning into him, and knew he was right. They'd saved each other, turning a rainy chance into a lifetime of light. If you find this story interesting and want to see more touching, tense, but meaningful situations, don't forget to subscribe to our channel today. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Share this story with your friends and remember to like the video so we can stay motivated to bring you more great and meaningful content. Thank you for watching and supporting us.